Recording in progress.
And the first order of business is approving the minutes. I hope folks had the opportunity to review those, and if you had any questions or wanted some corrections, let me know. Otherwise, I was hoping somebody could make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. Do I have a second? And Eva?
I second that.
Okay.
I second that as well.
Great. Thank you. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, could you raise your hand virtually or in real life? Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. So the first thing I've got on the schedule is developing a list of questions to ask potential police chief candidates. And I have not heard any more since I mentioned this, I guess in an email a week or so ago. It's my understanding that the county executive will have some community input onto whoever the police chief finalists may be. I don't have any additional information more than what you have. What I've read in the paper is that they're looking internally at least 2 candidates. So I'm not sure if the executive plans to present both candidates or just one finalist. And I'm not sure what a format might be, whether or not it's just meeting with the commission as a whole, or whether or not they're going to request that you send a representative among a bunch of other community groups and advocate groups, that type of thing, to meet with the candidates. So one of the things I hope that you could do is put together some types of questions that you might want to ask a chief candidate. And I've sent about 10 of them your way over the yesterday, and I apologize for that. I'm running behind on everything. Let's got some more questions in the meantime, and if you wanted to discuss amongst yourselves.
Can I say, I looked, who put these questions together again?
They're mostly from Mr. Donahue.
Oh, okay. When do we have to have questions in?
I would prefer that you had something today because, again, I don't know much about the process. I don't know if he wants the chief candidates to meet with the community sometime in the month of April, or if it's going to be later. I do know that they all plan to try to have a chief in place before Chief Jones, right when Chief Jones retires, and he's expected to retire June 30th.
I'd like to make a comment, I guess, on the questions that Mr. Donahue has presented. I think these are very solid and thorough technical questions, and I really, really appreciate that aspect. So I'd also like to contribute, as someone who doesn't have expertise on the inside aspects of policing, the idea that we should also add some questions that are more community focused and sort of principles focused. Questions that specifically focus on a candidate's approach to racial equity, gender equity in policing, since these are both big disparities. How they will, work to ensure that there is no racial or socioeconomic bias in the way that policing is done in the county, since that's a thing that has always been an issue. And also how to ensure that use of force is minimized to the extent possible, because I think that's an outcome that's best for everyone.
Could you put the proposed questions in the chat?
Yes, give me a second since I'm working by myself here.
And Susan, do we know if the Public Safety Committee or the council themselves are planning to try and have some kind of forum where they would be involved in asking any questions, or we don't know that yet?
I don't think so. I mean, traditionally, they've just interviewed whoever the executive picks and then either confirm or don't confirm. I haven't heard. I can take that suggestion back to the council if you'd like me to.
So their questioning will be at the time during the confirmation process then, right? How
Correct.
it's done? Gotcha. Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm still looking for the questions. I thought I had the right email up.
Susan, I have the link to them. I can just put them in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
And so I think the racial equity might be good in the sense that then I read somewhere where the department, like maybe all county agencies, have some kind of racial equity report. Don't they have to do something with that?
Did I include that in your email? Because yes, so there is an operating budget equity tool that all departments had to fill out about 10 or 11 questions, and they submitted that to the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, and they got a score. And the police department scored 3 out of 11, and it's considered emerging commitment. And they have several things going on, including we do have police representatives here, so if anybody wants to speak up, that is fine too. A lot of their training for recruits and in-service training incorporates that type of training. They have fair and impartial policing, which is an evidence-based approach to racial bias. They also have, and I don't remember the bill number, but it was sponsored by Councilmember Will Jawando, where candidates, recruits have to go to Montgomery College for 30 hours, I believe, and they get a lot of racial equity training there. What they were missing, and the narrative is not particularly clear, but what they were missing was they didn't have what we call a core team. And that is a team within the department that looks at internal and external racial equity practices. And it also helps promote the 8 hours of racial equity training that all county employees are required to take each year. And so they were missing that, and that will be part of the budget discussion for all departments, including the police department. I have not received answers back from the police department on that, so I'm not sure where they stand. Their operating budget discussion will be on April 18th. And
So you're expecting some kind of response from the department about that 3 out of 11 score and how they plan to address it?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So, and I see Francisco has his hand raised too. Please go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank Mike Donahue for drafting the questions, and I just have a couple of suggestions, a little bit in line with what Ms. Quitman suggested. And it's a very specific question having to do with the disparity in crime reduction in 2 of the districts, the more affluent districts in the county, and the continued increase crime in the other less affluent districts in the county. So I can put that question in the chat for everybody to see. And also what I would suggest is that on question number 7, that rather than saying that rather than asking for examples that directly contributed to the expansion of fair and impartial policing practices, that we ask that for examples that have directly contributed to the county's goals on racial equity and social justice. Similarly, in question number 10, where we ask for examples for positive outcomes that the Maryland Police Accountability Act had on law enforcement operations, that we change that to reducing crime in the county. Because what we should be focused more on is not outputs, but outcomes. And what I will do now is I will post my suggested question on the chat.
I'm also copying and pasting Mr. Donahue's questions too, because I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
thank you, because when I go to the document, it like shuts off the Teams. Won't let me do both at the same time on this device.
not letting me paste all at the same time. It's too long.
So while Susan is pasting that, I'd like to, first of all, apologize for being late because my Zoom was not cooperating with me. So it took me a minute to get on. But I just want to be clear, these suggested questions are for who exactly? I mean, are we sending them to the county executive for him to ask, or, I mean,
No.
what's the process we're looking at?
So my understanding, and I haven't been filled in for a couple of weeks now, is that the county executive intends to have chief candidates meet with community members. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that means the chief candidates will come here to talk to the Advisory Commission on Policing, or if the Advisory Commission on Policing will be asked to send 1 or 2 representatives to ask questions in a larger community setting, where more groups get to ask those types of questions. I don't know. And I also don't know when it's going to be. I try to check in. I have not heard any timelines. And since you only meet once a month, I was hoping that you could develop some questions now that you could agree on conceptually. And it doesn't have to be that many. It could be 2 or 3. I included some of Mr. Donohue's questions just to get people thinking about what they were interested in and what they wanted to pose to candidates. And I would like to have, I'm hoping that you can agree on 2 or 3 questions now that we can have ready in case you are asked to meet with the chief candidate before your next meeting.
Okay, so thanks. That's helpful because I was wondering why we were doing this. So let me suggest a couple of things. Okay, first of all, we have to decide who the audience is, right? I mean, that's kind of like that's issue 1. If we are preparing these in anticipation that we will be able to ask them that of a candidate, then that's one kind of, that's one kind of inquiry. In that instance, we will not probably have more than 30 minutes of somebody's time.
It's my expectation that you get to meet directly with chief candidates.
They can
or one
answer
key
10
finalist.
questions in 30 minutes. It's just not going to happen. The finalists are all the candidates. I mean,
There's
we're
only
talking
2
about meeting with one person or with like 3?
No, there are only 2 that I know of at this point, and county executives looking at 2 internal candidates. I don't know if
Okay, and so
both will meet with the community or only a finalist with me. I don't know that at this point.
say the last thing again. I didn't hear a lot of what you said.
I don't know if it means you'll meet with both of those candidates or just with a finalist.
Okay, so that's helpful. Is there a timeline for that?
I don't have one. That's why I was hoping that you could approve 2 or 3 questions at this meeting to have on hand in case that invitation comes between now and your next meeting.
Okay.
And just to be
so-
clear, you're not even sure that we'll be able to meet with them, right? You
I'm-
said that.
I'm sure that well, unless he changes his mind on having community input, I am sure that the Advisory Commission on Policing will be one of those entities to meet with the finalists.
Okay, so we're kind of putting cart before the horse then, because we don't know. So let me just, okay, so let me suggest a couple of things. First of all, that we send a letter to the county the county executive that says, hey, we'd like to meet with your candidates. And yes, here are the 2-3 questions that we are interested in having them answer. Okay, that's one document. That's probably a pretty short document. All right. Then there's a second document, which I think is more probably just as important, because what we want to do, I hope, is to help construct a dialogue that will occur in the community, right? And so that document is very different. That's a very public facing document. And so, I would suggest that we come up with a narrative that, you know, we can send to Bethesda Beat or whoever, you know, and say, hey, as the Advisory Commission on Policing, here are the things that we are concerned about. And here are the things we believe should be considered in the selection of the next candidate, of the next police chief. And then we can take, you know, a number of, you know, we can just like bullet point, you know, here are the things that are important. Then at that point, we're also sending a message to people in the community, first of all, that we're here, because one of the things we were accused of before was not being particularly relevant. And secondly, we're making an attempt to craft the to craft what the consideration like. Because I'm gonna be honest, questions are great if we were one-on-one interviewing the anybody. Bottom line is all this is gonna get lost in the sauce. And we need to pick in order to be relevant, we need to pick 2-3 things, maybe 4, that we can honestly say, this is the stuff that's important to us. Because, you know, so those are my suggestions. And it might be good, you know, if this is the way we want to proceed, that we figure out a way to do this in the next, come up with those 2 documents in the next week, circulate it, and have people weigh in. I'm more than happy to help in that, because this is not, I think if we sit here and we try to, you know, go back and forth as to what all this stuff is, we're gonna be here for 3 hours tonight. And there's a whole lot of stuff on the agenda I hope we can cover. Those are my suggestions.
As relates to the questions itself, one thing I didn't see on here, two things concern me about what you said about one is about the executive, and that is that he's going to he's going to go to the community himself. So I would want to know what community organizations that or members that he is thinking of setting up to ask questions. I would not like to see in this situation his hand-picked people. Okay, so I would like for us to suggest or organize people from organizations, or go if we so desire, you know, to ask questions. And so, and even with this number of people here, it's a diverse group of people. So if we come up with a few organizations or few people from organizations, it would be more diverse of a representation of the community than if the county executive would be picking people and setting up that process. The other thing is on the questions itself, I was wondering whether when we ask questions of these potential candidates, what they think about some of the current legislations that are up for consideration. And, you know, for example, you know, these traffic stop, consent to search policy legislation. What do they think, if it's approved, what do they think about these things that would make a change in how Montgomery County is doing policing at this point. So I would like for some of that be in the questions, because these things, if passed, will change how Montgomery County do policing.
Eva's had her hand up too.
Sorry, I can hear.
No, that's okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk.
So addressing the last point that Mr. Blair made, I do think that input is valuable on the pending legislation. However, I would caution against including those questions in the interview because that allows the county executive and his staff to either pick someone based on what that person thinks of the policies they do or don't like, or, you know, sign or not sign a policy based on a candidate that they would like to hire rather than based on what the people of Montgomery County want. So I would very much caution against that. However, maybe we could include a question that is something like, what policies would you want to see implemented if a county council member introduced them? Because that removes them from the current policy issues that are at hand and makes sure that the people's voice is heard over this one candidate's voice. The other things I'd like to address are comments I made in the chat. Regarding question 6, the second part of question 6 implicitly assumes that civilianization is a good thing and something that is necessary or valuable to streamlining the operations of the police force, and that may be true in some circumstances. But I think we want to be careful in wording that in a way that is neutral, so that if a candidate does not think that that's something that's a good idea, they are not stumbling to answer that question. And then I would also like to make a motion, if it's appropriate to do so, on a question to add.
Sure.
Okay, the question I would like to add is, I put it in the chat. What do you believe the role of the police chief is in ensuring that policing is equitable and does not have disparities across racial and socioeconomic groups? Montgomery County scored a 3 out of 11 on, I'm blanking on the name of the index, but whatever index it is that we scored a 3 out of 11 on. What are some ways you plan to address this? That's the question I would like to add.
Yeah, I'm looking through. I'm trying to find where you wrote that.
It's right before Christy's comment in the chat.
Okay, hold on. Oh, see it. Okay. I'm going to copy and paste. That'll be easier. All right, I am pushing that back up to the chat so people can see it, and I'm also keeping that. Okay. Does anybody want to second that or have discussion on it?
I don't think you need a motion on it. I think we add it, and then once we refine the list to maybe the 3, 4, 5, then I think we need to include that. And if so, we could just vote on the total number of questions that we think we're comfortable with going forward, if in fact the opportunity presents itself to ask them.
I agree, Mike, because like we're not at a point where we've motioned any of these to be on any sort of official list.
Correct.
All right, so are you starting your official list with Eva's modification of number 6?
Right.
What other questions do you want to highlight and bring forward for discussion?
I would suggest, just to start the conversation, maybe end it sooner than later, question 1, question 2, question 4, and question 7. And question 7 can include that can be reworded to address the racial equity and social justice issues that have been discussed by a couple other members. I think there's a way to capture that in one question. So that gives us 4 questions, and then we could wordsmith them so that everybody's comfortable with making sure that their preference to ask those, that content of those things are covered in those questions.
Okay.
So
I-
can
I'd
we
like-
not
can
put
I-
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Sure.
Terry.
So I want to go back. I'm right back with you, Sherry, just so you know. I think we need to back up a little bit. Basically what Sherry was saying, we need to formalize, who the venue is for this. Is this going to be us asking the questions? I think that's the first thing we got to do. And then I would partner with you, Sherry. I hear what you're saying, Susan. You got to get these questions out, but we got to know what the audience is. We got to know who's pitching the ball, right? And I'd be happy to partner with you within the next 24 hours, Sherry, to tease out, okay, we want question 3, we want question 4, because we may not want those questions based upon the audience or based
But-
upon who's going to be the pitcher with it. So
Could I ask
that's what I
what you
just
mean by
wanted to say.
audience? Do you
In
mean audience
terms of
bigger than
who's-
who the chief candidates are?
No, an audience in terms of who's going to be asking the questions. Is it going to be us? Is it just going to be 1 or 2 of us? Is it going to be someone else asking the questions? Are we going to be flies on the wall? Like when I term audience, I mean the people that are going to be having this communication.
Like what is the format and what is the venue, basically,
Yeah.
Right.
which we
And
don't
they-
know.
Yeah, it's unknown at
Right.
this point.
Yeah, based upon that, then we can, let's throw out 2 and keep 7 or, whatever.
But to Sherry's point, earlier about the letter that we would put out that says what's important to us, I actually go back to that to think about like what are the issues that are most important to us, and then pick the questions based on the issues that are most important to us and adapt them depending on the venue.
So can okay, so I think it'd be appropriate at this time for me to make at least 1 motion, and possibly 2. So my first motion is, I move that we write a letter to the county executive and provide questions that we believe should be asked to the police chief candidates, either by us or by him. And we can include in that letter that, hey, we'd like to talk to this person. But that's the first motion. That, to me, that's the threshold issue. So if anybody wants to second that, then we can go ahead with this.
Can I make an amendment, a suggested amendment to your motion? I don't know if you voted on it first.
By all means, because go by all means.
I agree, like with most of it, just say to be asked to the candidates in a public forum, whether it be a recorded video or I don't care what it is, but I think people should know that. And also in the letter, including our top 3 to 5 issues that we care about as a commission. Like the list of questions might be broader, right? But like, so if I could restate your motion as I would amend it, I would say, I motion that we send a letter to the county executive with both a list of questions to be asked to the police chief finalists in a public forum, along with content in the letter that indicates some of the top issues that we care about as a commission.
My only.
And I second that. I second that motion.
Okay.
Just a point of discussion. I do not think we should be sending a letter that has any questions that we would potentially ask a new candidate or potential candidate. Secondly, if we were to send a letter, because it sounds like we don't really know what role the county executive might be expecting us to play in this process, it may be beneficial to us to simply ask, hey, we're the ACP. We are interested in asking finalists for the police chief position questions. We are working on developing a set of questions to be able to ask at whatever the appropriate time is, which no one knows yet. And having that letter and a response back from the county executive, I think may be helpful. Once that response comes back, maybe it'll include more specific information. Maybe it won't. I think then at that point, we need to be ready to ask whatever questions we think are appropriate from the commission's perspective. Having been involved in some of these before, I'm just concerned about the integrity of the process and to uphold that, because I don't know of any other group that's sending questions, their questions, that they would potentially ask the candidates to the county executive. I think we want to have those questions ready, but definitely not share them ahead of time.
Well, let me just remind you that this is public. This forum is public. And so everybody's seen those questions already. So while I understand your concern, it's really, it's no disrespect intent, but it's kind of moot at this point. So, so if we could, vote on the motion, I think, you know, we can then move forward. That would be my suggestion.
And if we were to do that, based on that, thank you, Cherie, for that reminder. I would come back and say, in the letter, I wouldn't include these specific questions, but I might include issues, specific issues of concern that we would potentially ask questions about. I think keeping it general rather than specific at this point might accomplish the same objective. And get us to where we want to go without physically putting question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in a formal letter.
Right. I think that's what Christy was saying, that to include our overarching issues, issues of interest. So, do we need to have the
Yeah,
motion
and I
restated
actually-
before we vote on it? Or does Mr. Gonzalez have a question? Because his hand is still up, so I didn't know.
Just to clarify on something, Sherry, like I put a few things in the chat that I think are important and are kind of what I thought were rising to the top. The first being policing philosophy, the second one being equity and bias, the third being the appropriate role of police, which would be some kind of like version of question 6. And then the fourth thing being operations and management, to include things like recruitment and HR.
Sounds
I think
sounds
Pedro's
good
had
to
a
me.
question also, by the way.
Susan,
I'm
do
sorry,
you
Eva?
have that? Do you have what? Because whatever we end up agreeing to, somebody's going to have to write something.
I have the first item, and Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, dealing with overall look at policing and equity. Second one is role of policing in general, and the third is operations and management to include recruitment.
I actually put it in the chat, and
Okay.
my suggestions were policing philosophy, equity and bias, the appropriate role of police, which would be some sort of revised version of question 6, and then operations and management, including recruitment and HR.
So 4 things. Let me see if I can find it in the chat. Gotcha. Okay. I've got those.
Mr. Gonzalez, did you want to
Yes.
say something before we vote?
Yes, I really like your idea of a letter to the executive outlining our concerns, our priorities, and we need to figure those out. And then to me, the questions are, you know, we could work on the questions at the same time we work on the letter, and whether they get included in the letter or not, I have no preference whatsoever. But I do think it makes sense that we send the executive the letter saying these are priorities, these are our concerns, this is what we think you should be considering, and that we share that with the we share that letter with the council members as well.
Want to still bring back the point of him picking the community gathering or to question the potential candidates. That how is he planning on doing this? What is his do we get what is his selection process? And that that as anyone else, say us for instance, is going to have some kind of say-so in setting up this community a questioning process. Because it looks like if he is only in charge of, if he's only in charge of selecting who he wants, to go back a little bit to what Eve said, he can select who he wants to present the questions in any manner that he liked, if he is in charge of the entire process.
So you would like the letter to also include language urging him to have public forums and not specific groups? Is that where you're going? I'm trying to figure out how to put your concerns, which I think are very valid, in a letter.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to think of that. I can't think of it exactly. I haven't gotten it fully comprehensive in my mind how I would construct that question. And, I would have to have a moment to do that. But I would, on the surface, I would ask him, who are you engaging in setting up the community program of groups to question to the potential candidates? Who is going, can we be involved in the process as well?
So would your concern be met if we included language in the letter that said, we urge you to have at least one public forum where the community can express its areas of concern? Would that address your where you're trying to go, so it's not a hand-picked group?
Yes, I can agree with that.
Okay, so with that, with that, are we ready to vote?
Christina's got her hand up too.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. And I apologize. I was a few minutes late earlier. So I want to add to, and I'm sorry, I'm still getting to know everyone. So Eva's new question, I wanted to add to that. Part of my concern and also, motive for being here is the absence of admission of our own prejudices, which lend so heavily to why we have inequities and such. And so one of the things I like to do is to address that head on. I feel like that's super important. And so I have my edit here. I'm going to put it in the chat right now, Susan. I waited so it didn't get lost while I was talking about it. And so this would kind of go tag onto the top of Eva's question. And then as you can see, I just tagged, included her language towards the end. So how have you acknowledged and addressed your own prejudices that would contribute to your ability to ensuring that policing is equitable, and so forth and so on. So I would love to hear what people think about that approach. But I definitely don't want to lose the opportunity to directly address the prejudices that may exist within the candidates that we are going to be having the opportunity to interview. And let alone their answer, their response to being asked that directly will give us a lot of insight into who we're talking to. So that's all.
I think that's I mean, I definitely see that as honoring the question that I put forth. And I think that's a great way to really ensure that we are asking these people this question about how they approach racial equity at all levels of their job. So I'm very much in favor of this.
Thank you, Eva.
Are we ready to vote?
I forgot what the motion was.
You made it.
I know.
It's your motion.
Let's just do a quick refresher. The motion was to send a letter. I move that we send a letter to the chief, which both outlines our primary
Executive.
concerns or
Let me
issues.
stop you. We're sending it to the county executive, not to the chief. That's
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry.
important.
That's what I meant to
That's-
say.
that's
That's what I meant to say. To the county executive that outlines our major topical issues that we're most interested in learning more about. And second, may include a list of questions that we would like him to consider asking the chief candidates in a public forum.
And urges him to have a public forum.
Now, that was not part of the original motion, but I'll amend again
that
to say,
was-
and urge the county executive to hold at least one public forum to enhance community engagement around the hiring and selection process.
I second that.
All right, do we have a vote? Everyone who says aye,
Oop, there we
see.
go.
Everybody's moving around the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I haven't voted, Susan Christie. I just need a point of clarity. This is with or without questions?
I worded it as may include. So,
Thank you.
and I think the reason why is because we just had this discussion about how some of the topics and areas of focus and the community engagement may be more important than the questions themselves, depending on the form and forum in which some of these discussions take place.
So how about this? If we get any definite date on when the county executive wants to have chief candidates meet with community, could we schedule a special meeting so that you could vote on questions and do it rather quickly? I don't know what people's schedules are looking like.
And we would just need a quorum, right, Susan? So it doesn't even
Yeah.
have to be everyone.
So,
So we have to be half of us.
so
I motion that we have a special meeting once we figure out the date of any county executive plans for engaging on this
You don't
process.
really need to move that. That's subject to the call of
Okay.
the chair. So,
All right. Never
and
mind. I withdraw.
arguably could, without violating the Open Meetings Act, we, the questions could be sent out and people could just vote on them. We just like rank them. Here's what we like. So we could actually achieve that pretty quickly. But no, you don't have to move for that because that's up to the call of the chair. So at this point, we have voted to send the letter. Oh, were there any nays? Was it unanimous? Because I wasn't counting.
Christina,
Okay. So at this point, we have voted to send a letter to the county executive asking, at least raising issues, and we may include questions, and we are requesting that he engage in a public forum to heighten community engagement on this. That's the vote, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the second issue, as I understand it, and I don't know if we even need this, but you know, might, is that we agreed to do, well, the second motion I'm making is that we consider, or that we do a public letter saying this is what we are looking for in a police chief, in the new police chief.
I second
That's
that.
the second motion. Okay. And even if it only gets picked up on, you know, on our on our thingy, on our, you know, what is it, our
Can I amend that motion?
web, that's the only place it goes.
Huh?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
my dog was getting ready to come in here, so I was talking quick. But yes, by all means.
I amend that motion to say that we should send a public letter to the county executive specifying what it is that we want in a police chief, and also that those things that we want in a police chief are decided by a quorum of the members, either through a special meeting or through some sort of public email chain, abiding by the Open Meetings Act.
I'm a little confused because my thinking on the second motion was really more of a press document, you know, something for us to publicly release so that the community understands we didn't sleep through this. We let we said publicly these are the things that are important to us. And I'm not sure if what you're asking is the same, or whether it's really substantially different.
I guess I'm just specifying that we should make sure to have a special session on that, on determining those priorities, or do so during one of our regular monthly meetings, depending on what the timeline is. But I think we should have all of the members in attendance rather than just a quorum.
And I agree that all members should be in attendance, but really the rules only require for a quorum, so we can't make people come if they don't want to come. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you know.
The reality is, given
we
the
can't
timeline
achieve
of
that.
this, if he wants to have a person in place by June 30th, the timeline on this is that we cannot wait until our next monthly meeting to have this discussion around some of these priorities. And so I would just request the chair that we strongly consider getting something scheduled so that we can plan to be there if we care about it. And hopefully have some sort of quorum.
Yeah, I think the solution that Christy proposed is a good one.
We just don't have the luxury of time if he wants to put someone in place by June 30th, because the reality is that this is going to move very quickly over the next, you know, month and a half or whatever.
So are you suggesting, Christy, that we ask Susan to see if we can basically get a meeting with the county executive? Is that
No.
sort of the, or not?
No, we need to send
I'm
a
trying to
letter
figure
to
out
the
how we
county.
achieve this.
I think we need to have, I don't think we're prepared for it or have time tonight to go into great detail on what are those 3 to 4 or 5 things that we care most about in order to help inform that letter, in order to help inform whatever questions in whatever form arises. And so we're going to have a special meeting to talk through some of that if we want to do it the right way.
And as
So-
we discuss later today, our work plan, that can also inform and help us crystallize what those key concerns are and what our priorities are and what we think is important in a new police chief.
So, I understand the gravity of what you're saying, Christine. I agree with it, you know, because all of us haven't all of us haven't been here for a gazillion years. And so so let me just table that. I'm willing to table that motion so that we are not under the gun, so to speak, to come up with that. But I would suggest that for our next meeting, that we do circulate some priorities beforehand so that we're all very clear on what, you know, and then we can vote on that. I mean, I don't tell me what y'all want to do. I mean, I'm retired. I can be here every day, so it's okay.
So I hear they're saying that concepts versus questions, correct? Issues versus questions.
Yeah, I think the concern at this juncture is I had made a motion that we do a public letter, right? And that public letter say some things and outline these are our priorities for the next, these are our priorities, and we believe they should be prioritized in selecting the next police chief. And Christie's concern is, well, we haven't as a group set our priorities, so we can't do that. And so, you know, I think that's right. And so, you know, my fallback position is I can just table that motion, and at the next meeting, we set our priorities as a group.
This is Christina. I have a question. And Eva, please let me know if I'm like saying the same thing or I'm off. But maybe it's like the idea is to have some sort of, we're saying what we want to see in a chief, but like, and we're speaking on behalf of the commission, but kind of like the voice of the community. And do we have enough from the community at this point to put that forth in a way that will be received by the community? Like they can say, oh yeah, this is our voice. We can see our voice in this. And maybe we don't have time for that. So in order to kind of bridge that gap or close that circle in the letter that we are putting out to the public, which could also serve as a press release, could be inviting the community to communicate with us. I simply don't know if the community has been invited to give comments, put forth questions or concerns to any other entity in a formal way that would make this invitation an overstep of some sort. But because we haven't really gotten into the community yet, and this is one of the biggest things that's going to happen in the community in this area, right? I don't know, maybe I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not sure the logistics behind that, or if that even gets to kind of what the feeling that Eva was articulating to us.
Yeah, I like the idea of sort of public listening sessions. I think the thing I was mostly trying to articulate is that we as a committee need to meet and set our own priorities in general, but more specifically our own priorities. Like we need to get our own stuff straight for what we want to achieve, because I don't think anyone in this committee agrees on that at the moment. However, it is also extremely important to listen to the community's voice, and I'm very eager at the prospect of organizing, some sort of ACP town halls over the near future, and I'm happy to spearhead organizing that if that's something folks and or Susan, who is also a person, but would like to work with me on. But that's
So
not
should
the
we
issue
vote on
right
this
now.
letter after we talk about the next thing? Then we'll be more situated to know if we actually, when we talk about the work plan, then can we bring this back? Can we table this vote?
Yeah, I volunteered to table the motion. I'm perfectly happy with that.
I
So we can
second.
go to the next
table.
part of the next thing on the agenda. I don't know
Yeah.
what that is.
Sorry, it's taking a look at the draft work plan, which is basically just a template, and I can share it on my screen. I think I can anyway. And there's not enough time tonight to really set exactly what you wanted to work on, but I was hoping this would prompt a discussion of whether or not the work plan template is something you'd like to use. And if different priorities come up for you, whether or not you'd like to start looking at informal assignment of subcommittees. And that kind of bleeds into the next item of looking at least one bill that's been assigned to the commission, which is the Freedom to Leave Act. So, I don't know, Mr. Donahue, did you want to talk about this at all?
Sure. Just as Susan said, I just made this stuff up really from the information about the ACP, our mission, and also just a general outline of what we would want to do or have, I would say, in place as a foundation, so that if someone asks us, like, what's the goal, what's the strategy, how do we plan to recommend to the council, policies, programs, legislation, or regulations in regards to policing in Montgomery County. This gives us a document that we can go back to, just so that we have something that establishes our mission, our goal, and how we plan to proceed in achieving that mission, hopefully. And again, as priorities, whether it's 6 months, a year out, whatever time frame we determine is appropriate, then obviously we would include that or reference that as far as the priorities that we plan to pursue within whatever time frame we think is reasonable for us to do that. And what I try to do is focus on the community policing aspect or philosophy or model of the department. I think a lot of the things we've already discussed, with whether it's racial equity, traffic stops, social justice, all recruitment, all that has a community policing component, right? So the philosophy of the department, if they had a written community policing plan, that plan would outline their goals, their objectives, strategies, outcomes, and measures to accomplish that. And so, again, this is somewhat of a dynamic document that can be used by us as we define our priorities and as we move forward. But I try to establish it in such a way that it gives us the ability to address whatever issues, priority issues, or if there's a new piece of legislation that we need to address, and go forward with making sure that we as a commission follow some kind of logical framework to accomplish our objective.
I really like the way that this work plan is laid out. Yeah, I think we can talk about how we're gathering our data and information, the balance of quantitative and qualitative such things. But I think as a jumping off point, we can discuss the minutiae of this in subsequent meetings and set what our priorities are. But I really like this document, and I want to ensure that this document gets set in place as quickly as possible, so that we can get down to the business of making those recommendations as quickly as possible, because that's what we're here to do.
So are we gonna, I'm sorry, my screen is saying, telling me I have low bandwidth. I don't even know what that means. So do we need to, vote on accepting this document?
And I just wanna, I looked at the document, I think it's pretty good, but I would suggest that when we accept it, but with the idea that it can be amended.
Yeah, I like the document, and I thank Michael Donahue for all the work that he's put into drafting something that can be easily adapted. But I would like to make a couple of suggestions, and one is that the goal of the commission be very specific, and I have some proposed language on that. And regarding the objectives, I think, again, that we need to be fairly specific. We know we need to, we are required to review legislation, pending legislation. So that has to be one of the specific objectives that we need to comply, that we need to include. Also, we need to develop and implement a public outreach plan. We should also agree on whether we want to take any or all of the 3 issues that previously left for us to, or recommended that we follow up with. And of course, you know, our role, what is our role? Selection of the MCPD police, the new police chief. So these are very specific objectives that I think need to be included in the work.
So, subject to, both of those concerns, would it be appropriate to call this the preliminary work plan of the Montgomery County ACP? So instead of proposed work plan, it would be preliminary work plan, and we could agree to revisit it at a future point. And we can, it is now April. So how about if we agree to revisit this in June? Or what is 3 months? What is 3 months from April? July, I guess, right? This is the 4th month, that's the 7th month. So we can agree to revisit it, let's say every 3 months to figure out if this still meets our needs and concerns. That would be my motion.
I'll second your motion.
If I may, I think Mr. Donahue, again, thank you for the work that you put in. Remember, this is just a draft, and it's a dynamic document. It's not a static document. So versus looking at it every 3 months, maybe if we could just maybe each member pick out 1 to 2 items that they're passionate about, and then try and frame a more forward-going document versus just looking at it as a final document.
Well, that's why I respect that, and that's why I suggested that we call it a preliminary work plan. You know, in order to give us time to actually do that, because there's not a lot. I mean, there's I think our I think everyone's knowledge about these things is going to increase substantially the more meetings and stuff we have, and so will people's levels of interest change and shift. I said July because that's when our report is due. And so this will allow us to be able to have a work plan to include in the report, and to have the flexibility to drill down and change things if we need to. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, you know, and that's the way the work has to get done. Will be in, you know, committee or subcommittee formats. But
What if we did a little rewording on the motion and said something like the ACP to adopt in principle the preliminary work plan to be reviewed semi-annually, at least annually, whatever you think was necessary, and modified accordingly based on emerging issues, or we'll make up some other words too, because I think that it's yes, we would want to revisit this at some interval, whatever we think is reasonable, based on the work we're doing. And if we just adopt this in principle as a preliminary approach, obviously this may change as we go forward. Would that something like that make sense?
I would second a motion along those lines.
I would propose an alternative approach, and that is that we all have the document. We provide suggestions on specific changes to Michael, and over the next we can revisit the revised work plan over the next few meetings, so that we can come up with something perhaps by the July that we can include in the yearly report that is due July 1st. But I mean, I think this is a very good template, but it's not specific enough for us to use it as a guiding document for us or for the public, as it now stands.
I understand what you're saying. I just think that my fear is that if we don't adopt this, the necessity to come back to it will, kind of be dissipated, and so, I think we know that if we call it preliminary and we agree to review it in 6 months, then I think that means that the work is ongoing, which sounds like Mr. Gonzalez, that is what you are suggesting, that we need to make this a more robust document, and I get that. I just don't want the perfect to become the enemy of the good. I think we can have a very robust document, but it's good to start with a document, period,
Could I make a suggestion that might get us? I'm not sure what that noise is, sorry. Can I make a suggestion? Could I suggest that we maybe vote on this document to make it preliminary, with the expectation that we form perhaps a subcommittee to work on some very specific suggested edits, and then bring this back to our June meeting for discussion with proposed edits for finalization of a more stable document in July.
That makes sense.
I like that idea, and I'd be happy to serve on that subcommittee as well.
Works for me.
In here.
Are there any objections? Is everybody happy with this?
So I don't know if we have to motion or do anything to formalize that, but
A formal vote never hurts. So if
okay, let me make a
good.
let me make a motion. I'll make a formal motion then. I motion that we approve the current draft of the work plan as a preliminary guiding document and form a subcommittee to propose specific edits to the committee in our June meeting for discussion, and propose a vote to finalize the outcome of that discussion in our July meeting.
I second that motion.
Yeah, could I? If we could just make the decision before the July 1st deadline, that would be ideal, because then we could include it in the report. That's just,
that was my question as well. I thought we had to have this by July, so we would probably need to finalize it before then, correct?
I was under the impression that it wasn't going to be a finalized document at any point, that it was always going to be a living document.
That was
And
my,
that the
I was
committee
trying to
would
say,
just put additions,
Which
make
of-
the edits as necessary, but that what we have now would go with the. Yeah, maybe we do need some clarity on that, because now I don't know.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, there's
I
a
rephrase
difference
the question.
between
I'll look at-
having a preliminary guiding document versus having a finalized document that's revisited on a certain
Yeah.
basis, right? And so, like, I mean, saying a document is especially a work plan, is always open and living. I don't know if that really works, right? Because you need some stability. Like, I'm not saying never change the document, but I'm saying, like, maybe it's every 6 months you revisit or whatever, or every 3 months or whatever.
And I don't think there's not a requirement that this be in the annual report. Matter of fact, there's no requirement we have to have one. I just thought it kind of made sense for us to have some kind of consensus as to where we're going, how to get there. That's kind of way this is not specific for a reason. You could apply this framework to any topic we decide is a priority by any subcommittee or anybody else on the commission. So that was my kind of thought process when I put this together, and I agree. Like, if our mission changes, we have to revise this document. If our goals change, our objectives and obviously that's, to me, the things that would drive changing the content of this. Absent that, I really don't, because remember, if we attack a certain issue like a piece of legislation, there's going to be specifics to that piece of legislation. We're going to discuss, talk about, agree on, comments, time, all that kind of stuff is going to fall out of these individual assignments. That's not what should be in this document. So, but I agree that as things change over time, that we do need to go back and revisit this, and having this as an appendix or something annual report, I don't think hurts anything. It just shows the council and everybody else that we do have some kind of logical strategy for us to accomplish our mission. That's kind of what I thought this document would help do.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I just think, like, people haven't had a chance to really provide specific input and edits. So I guess I think it would be good to make sure that we're all, like, contributing to it.
yeah.
Yes, and if you accept it in principle as the preliminary, and then if we want to finalize it prior to July 1 to possibly be included in the annual report, then that would be that window for that to happen.
Yes.
Christy, I thought your motion was about the process of this document, not the document itself, right? Like, What I seconded, and I must, maybe I heard incorrectly, understood incorrectly, was that the process of how we're going to make sure this document gets reviewed, edited, and all of us get to contribute, not the document itself.
Aren't those sort of the same? I mean, like,
No, no,
well,
one's a
like,
process and one's the actual content.
so my motion was meant to be approving the document in concept as a preliminary document, but allowing for a process by which we would gather and process through all of our individual comments, utilizing a subcommittee structure so that we could do some in-between work, and bring it to the full committee for discussion in our next meeting.
I think that's two motions. I think one motion is accepting the document as a preliminary document, and the second motion is forming the subcommittee, empowering them to edit the document based on suggestions from the commission.
Agreed.
I'll make a motion to accept the document in principle as preliminary.
I second that.
Okay, let's vote on that and then get to the next question.
Who's in favor? Okay, motion passes. Okay.
And so the next decision is about the process. And I can't remember if it was Chrissy or Christine. I think Christine, you had concerns about the process. Do you want to make a motion to ensure that your concerns are addressed?
Oh no, I like Christie's proposal on forming the subcommittee. I like that proposal. I seconded that. That's what I thought I was seconding the first time.
Okay.
So I guess, Christy, you were saying that we would have a
Yeah,
subcommittee, and then you formulated kind of like a timeline too.
yeah, I mean, I guess like the outcome of one motion versus two is kind of the same, right? Because we
Yes, but
just
they're different
voted to
things.
be, right, we just voted for the document to be preliminary.
Mhm.
Right.
The second
And
part
then
of my
now I guess the
initial
motion is.
motion
Mhm.
was to form a subcommittee to provide input and suggested edits to the document and bring forth those recommended suggestions for discussion to our next meeting, our May meeting.
And I second that.
And a vote, everyone in
Is there
favor?
any further discussion on that motion?
I just, I had initially included formalization or finalization in July, but I think we can just figure out where the
Fair
input
enough.
leaves us in May and go from there.
Okay, so are we voting on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are voting to form the subcommittee and to have the subcommittee bring forth recommendations to our May meeting for discussion on the document.
Yes, ma'am. And then the next step will be people volunteering to be on the subcommittee.
Mm-hmm. And Eva already
So
said,
we voting on that?
Everyone voting, and please vote by raising your hand in favor of that motion. Thank you. 1, 2. Okay, thank you. That passes.
And just a procedural question, Susan. If we have a subcommittee, the subcommittee can speak freely. They just have to record that they are meeting. What are the rules around a
They
subcommittee?
really don't have to do anything, is my understanding.
Okay,
The last PAC iteration they did, we put everything up on the website. I am happy to do that again, but you're not subject to the Open Meetings Act. You bring recommendations back to the full commission and it's discussed at that point in an open meeting.
thank you.
Soon, is there is there a limit on the number of subcommittee members before it establishes a quorum and gets into the little bit
Right.
over the line?
Yeah, it would be 7. I mean,
Okay.
you can't have 7.
Well, I'll volunteer to be a member of the subcommittee.
So
Six
it
to
has
one.
to be less than 7. Is that what you're saying, Susan? The
Yes,
subcommittee
so it would
must
be
be
a-
less than 7. Okay.
Yeah,
Can we just have everyone raise their hand if they want to be on the subcommittee?
okay. So I have Francisco, Eva, and Mike. And Christina.
Yes, and Susan, I have a clarifying question on the motion that we just passed in order to form the subcommittee. At the end there was language regarding July, the due date of, I guess, the subcommittee coming back to the commission. My concern is adding that to that motion. Does that, I want to make sure that that our intentions are validated through our motion, meaning that this subcommittee will last and has been granted authority to operate within the commission beyond July based on that motion, or is this subcommittee only through July because we've included that in the motion? And is there harm in clarifying that we are a motion to form this subcommittee, period, as opposed to including the dates within the motion?
I
just
did
wanna-
not include July within the motion. The motion that we passed only included mention of bringing forth recommendations into our May meeting. That was as far as the timeline went in the motion that passed.
Yes, that brings forth my concern on when we're establishing a subcommittee through motion. If we're including dates, it restricts that entire subcommittee to that motion. Like, we should be very explicit if we are forming a subcommittee by motion. So
You
that
can
that
make-
subcommittee can legitimately continue to function. And it would really truly only be disbanded by motion. Where now at this point, if we have a date in that motion, it could be questioned. I just want to make sure our record's clean
I think the
and
date,
that committee is established.
I think the date in the vote was to bring back the recommendations. It's more procedural. You can make a motion right now to form the subcommittee and vote on it. And there doesn't have to be any timeline or expiration date on that.
The language can be the same that Christy used in forming the subcommittee, for the subcommittee to provide input and bring to the commission regarding our work plan.
I mean, you can make it very basic as I move to establish the subcommittee to work on the work plan.
Okay, I move to establish a subcommittee to work on the work plan.
Second,
Thanks. Everyone in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, we've got the four members, Mike, Eva, Francisco, and Christina.
Yes.
Everyone in favor?
Do we
please
have to motion, is that like in the record that they are? Like if a person wants to join the subcommittee later, like how does that, just from a
They can
procedural
they can join
perspective?
it later. Yeah, it's not that formal.
Yeah, the only thing we have to worry about is that it doesn't get to 7.
Yeah,
That's the take home problem.
And we would also we would throughout the process of the subcommittee, we would be receiving input from all the members of the commission, correct?
No, you need to work alone as a subcommittee and then bring your recommendations to the full commission for further discussion.
however, Susan, if someone wanted to send a document or a communication to the subcommittee as a member, they could do that, right?
It would be hard for me to track to make sure that you don't have a quorum of the commission speaking off record. So why don't you, if anybody has that, why don't you send that to the chair, to Brian Bellamy, and you can copy me and I can make sure things get where it needs to go.
That makes sense.
All right, is there a vote on the subcommittee? To approve a subcommittee to look at the work plan?
Yeah,
think
I
it was-
thought we took that vote.
Okay.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think, that's why we were asking for people to volunteer to be on
Okay.
it. So those are the 4 people. I just want to make sure that anybody who wanted to be on it wasn't overlooked, because it was just kind of a hand raising thing.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually formally took a vote. Christina motioned, I seconded to actually establish a subcommittee. Then I think we derailed a
No,
little
we
bit.
voted.
Well,
We
I think
voted.
we're like double motioning things because we're like splitting up motions into like various motions to make
Right.
sure we have clarity. I don't know how much clarity. Maybe
No,
over claritying.
Christy, this wasn't to break up because of clarity. It was 2 different things. The document itself and having a subcommittee to work on that document are 2 different approvals, 2 different
Right,
votes.
and
I
we
might not
voted
agree
on
with
the
the document
motion.
as, I might
We
not
voted
agree
on
with
the
the
motion that
document
I
as it
made
is.
to create a subcommittee to work on recommendations. We voted on that.
You
And
said
then we
until
voted
May,
again
but if
to,
you don't want the record to be clean, that's fine. But you said until May, and I'm letting you know, I'm a proactive person, not someone that can come back to us 6 months later and say, we actually don't have an established committee because that committee was only voted on to come back in May. So the point was to have an established committee that can work on this work plan until that is unestablished or de-established by another motion. Right now, it would be de-established past May if it stood with the motion that was put forth. And clarity is very important in our motions and the way that we manage the meetings. It's extremely important.
Okay, so Susan, what do you have as the last vote we took? Let's start there.
The vote was, I thought was more of a process, a motion about process to form the subcommittee that would make suggested edits to the work plan, bring that those recommendations to the full commission at the May meeting.
Okay. So is that was what I thought we were voting on. Establish a subcommittee, the subcommittee will bring recommendations.
So this second vote is to vote for who's going to be on it.
And
Just-
then we don't need to vote to who's
Okay.
be on it, 'cause that's volunteer. We don't have to approve people. If you want to be on it, you can be on it. And if you think you can't be on it, then let somebody know so that, maybe other folks can fill in. But once we've established it, people can self-appoint to that. That's not, I don't think that's required.
Long as we don't
So-
go past the prescribed 7.
As long as you don't hit the 7, that's right. So I think, and I understand Mr. Lane's concern about whether that mention of May ends the subcommittee at that point. And that's why I asked Susan to read it, because the way that's written, the subcommittee itself does not end in May. So I respect that concern, but I think the drafting of as I just heard it, May. Are you okay with that, Ms. Lane?
I mean, I've made my statement. If there's no agreement or alignment with what I've interpreted that to be, then we can move on.
I think to your point about clarity, Christina, perhaps to address your concern, I mean, I don't know if we've already voted or we haven't. I thought we voted, but
I think
if
we
if
did, and I
we
think
can
that
amend,
that it was addressed, and my interpretation just doesn't align, but if the interpretation of the commission is that the motion extends past the mention of May, which is in the motion, then that's what it is, right? But just to clarify, my vote was under the impression that this was for a May bring back, because that's what the motion says.
And I think that's right. I mean, that's the only trigger that May brings is a duty of the subcommittee to bring back suggestions, etc. The mention of May does not trigger anything else.
I respectfully understand that we have a different interpretation, and so I don't know what else we're saying about it, really. I mean, I think that if the commission believes that established, and that's the intention, is to establish the subcommittee under that motion, and that the date is not there to trigger the end of that, then okay.
Yes,
Yes, that is how it was intended, I believe, and that is how we will construe it.
yes.
Yeah. So what, okay, and so now we have also established the 4 people who want to be on the subcommittee. There's nobody else who wants to be on the subcommittee, right? Everybody is good. I didn't know if Mr. Oh, where'd he go? Mr. Petros, I didn't know if you were raising your hand to be on the subcommittee, because I saw your hand go up. I think we may have. Okay, there you are.
I would just like to ask, what is going to go on in this subcommittee, and what is the subcommittee for specifically? I heard a few things, but I also wanted just a little bit of clarity on it before I joined.
the subcommittee is meant to, so Mr. Donahue wrote the principles document that formed the basis of this preliminary work plan, but there has not been a good opportunity for the committee to provide red line edits, suggested edits, additional thoughts, anything else. It was primarily a document written by Mr. Donahue, which we very much appreciate, so thank you. And so we are approving it as a preliminary document so that we have something to work from as the weeks go by, because we have some very pressing business that we need to address, including review of a piece of legislation, as well as some of this police chief stuff. However, we want to make sure that people on the committee have a chance to weigh in. And so we would do that through a subcommittee, because using the subcommittee structure, that gives an ability for not every single one of us to provide line edits all together in one meeting, but it gets us into some discussion in between meetings as a subcommittee, where we can send some inputs to the subcommittee for consideration on an individual basis. The subcommittee can address them in a smaller group, and then we can then talk about it in greater depth. For lack of a better term, finalization of our work plan, even though it's a living document, a more stable work plan that has everyone's opinions and inputs kind of integrated in a better way in May.
Thank you so much. As for that, then I would be interested in working in that subcommittee. Sorry, because there was just a lot going on. I just wanted to at least parse through that information to know clearly what would be the goal for that subcommittee while working with that task, that work plan. Thank you. I'd be interested.
Okay, so that adds Mr. Bien. I don't want to get your name wrong.
That's okay. Bien.
Okay. So you're added to the subcommittee then. Okay. So the next, I'm looking at this agenda, I'm trying to figure out, Susan has already told us that we're over our time, and I guess that's why we all got knocked off, at least I did. And so I think the only other thing that was on the agenda was Councilmember Jawando's, what is it called? Free to Leave Act?
Yes,
Is
and
that the only other thing, Susan?
yes, you can table that till the next meeting.
Well, instead of tabling it, what I would suggest is that, people actually, take, some time, and at the next meeting that we discuss it as the first item on our agenda.
Okay.
Because, I think the council will probably get to that in what, June? When is there a, June? Okay. So if we take it up in May, at our next meeting, the first item on the agenda, then I think we're golden.
Okay.
Anybody have any concerns with that approach?
No, I just want to make sure that we dedicate at least like the first 15 minutes of May's meeting just to discussing that issue because it's an important issue and we really took longer on things than expected tonight. So we should make sure to have a concentrated and direct discussion about that issue next meeting.
And I agree with you, and I think, we should also ask, Susan, to see if if Councilmember Jawando can actually join us, for that discussion.
Might be a little difficult in May.
I know, because of the budget, but we can at least, if he can't come, maybe his chief of staff can come. I mean, maybe somebody from the office can come and, present his whatever he wants us to hear, or answer whatever questions we may have.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
I think that would be great.
I agree. It doesn't have to be a motion, right?
No, it
No.
doesn't.
Okay.
We do
okay.
not have to have motion. Is there, I think that's really the only thing left. And so what we do need a motion for is to adjourn. Anybody want to make that?
Can I
I'll
bring
make
up
that
one
motion.
one thing before we do that?
Okay.
Thank you. For the agenda for next meeting, if we have time, one of the things I wanted to put on there, I don't know if anyone else has had an opportunity to review the dashboard. I think Susan sent that link out maybe for our last meeting. You may recall that dashboard includes about 400 recommendations from the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force and also the ELEA 4A audit findings. I had a chance to go through that, and I think it would be helpful if the department is able to provide a current, I want to say current plan or priorities as to the issues. There's a lot of stuff in there if you haven't seen it. A lot of it is duplicative. And it's very hard to follow, and the statuses are sometimes conflicting.
Yes.
These recommendations are the same, right, from two different bodies. So I've gone through and I've tried to weed all that out, and I have a document that has about 35 what I consider the non-duplicative priority hot button current issues. Some of the things we've talked about tonight are in there, but I would like to, it would help inform us going forward for our work plan, maybe. So I think if we have a representative just give us an update on their current priorities and what they're working on right now would be very helpful. If not, we could do that maybe at a future meeting.
This is which document? Can you just reiterate just so I could hear?
It's the dashboard that's online that documents the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force recommendations and the audit findings.
Thank you. Great. Could Susan circulate your document that you've done some analysis on?
She is not, to my knowledge, no.
I'm asking whether you could share it.
Oh, sure, I could share that, absolutely.
And then does the police department have like an updated narrative saying what, what's done, what's not been done?
That's part of the dashboard. But I think what Mr. Donahue's saying, and I don't want to speak for you, is that it's not very detailed. So what
No,
are
I
they?
know. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's contradictory. I know. I'm asking if, you know, I'm assuming that the document that the dashboard as it appears may not be the operation that the police department has on where they are on these various, you know, items. And what I'm asking is, if that's accurate, can we see the police department's document?
I don't want to speak for Mr. Donahue, but I believe that's what he was asking if we could get. Was correct, Mr. Donahue?
Yes, thanks, Sean. Yeah, if the document exists, it would be good to share it
That's
with.
I'm asking it again in a different. So Lieutenant Ascenti, is this something we can get? Does it exist?
I'd have to compare what's online to the version that I've seen internally. I'm not sure if they're exactly the same. And I'd have to check to see if that's something that we can disseminate, or if we're going off the public dashboard version. But I'll check into that, and I'll let Susan know.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Mike, you're asking to get a formal update on the agenda next month, right?
Yes, Chris, if it was there's whatever that current status is based on whatever document they're following, just an update as to where they are on those issues, correct? Because I think the more we know about what they know going forward, I think will help us kind of maybe drive some of the discussion and questions we have about some of the issues we think are important.
I think that's a
All
good
right,
idea.
so once we have received, I guess, once the intention has been cemented to receive this document, should we move to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I
I
second that
second that.
motion.
All
Good
in
night,
favor?
everybody.